Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's second and final session of WCET's 2021 Summit Series. The first session in April was the EdTech Gambit, and it played off the success of the Queen's Gambit mini-series and had an abundant supply of chess metaphors as we looked at the impact of the changes in educational technologies on higher education. You can still access that content through the SpeedLoop platform. Summit registrants can access all content from both topics, today's and last month's, through the month of June. Today's session is WCET Discovery, where no educator has gone before, which plays off the Paramount Plus series that is the latest entry in the Star Trek universe. Before we boldly go where no person has gone before, I do need to make a quick apology to our sci-fi fanatics out there. And you know who you are, and some of them are on the panel today, as we will see. I hope that you can forgive us by mixing sci-fi universes by putting a Star Trek themed event on a Star Wars inspired May the 4th be with you day. Please forgive us for that. We'll have fun with this anyway. And anyway, today's event is firmly focused on the future, and who knows, anything can happen as we go into the future. We have a truly amazing lineup of speakers for you here today and discussants, deep thinkers about where higher education is headed for the future. And I thank you for joining us for this ride. Now it's time to hit warp speed and even more tortured space references after the chess references last month. So let me introduce our captain for this session, Lisa McIntyre-Height. She's a senior principal of learning solutions at Guild Education. Lisa was the founding dean for competency-based education and the executive director for learning innovation at Laureate Education, where she developed its direct assessment offering, seeing it through from pilot to scale. Her professional passion is rooted in the desire to make measurable steps to address inequity in educational systems and to expand access to high quality, personalized learning ecosystems. Remember that we want your questions, so feel free to add them in Feedloop or directly through Zoom Q&A. Lisa, we're delighted to have you captain today's opening panel. I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Russ, for that for that wonderful introduction. And I have to apologize for not knowing enough Star Wars references or Star Trek references to really keep the flow going, but I think we're going to be okay. I am excited to introduce our esteemed panel today, and so do just want to take a moment and introduce the panel that you'll hear from before we get started. Brian Alexander is here with us, and he is an award-winning, internationally known futurist, researcher, writer, speaker, consultant, teacher, really focused in the field of higher education's future. He's a senior scholar at Georgetown University and teaches graduate seminars in their Learning, Design, and Technology program. Alexander speaks widely and publishes frequently, with articles appearing in venues like the Atlantic Monthly, Inside Higher Ed, and he recently published Academia Next, The Futures of Higher Education for Johns Hopkins University Press, which won an Association of Professional Futurists Award. He's currently working on Universities on Fire, Higher Education in the Age of Climate Crisis. So welcome, Brian. Thank you for joining. We are also joined by Dr. Robbie Melton, who is Associate Vice President for Tennessee State University's Smart Global Technology Innovation Center. She's a professor and dean of the graduate school, and she's also a renowned international presenter, researcher, and technology evaluator regarding the transformation of smart mobile devices, wearable technologies, and mixed reality technologies of VR, AR, and hologram technologies from immersive learning. Melton acquired the distinction of appologist, which I believe is her Twitter handle as well, due to her study of the pedagogy teaching with mobile apps and her curation of mobile apps for all spectrums of education. She's the winner of numerous international tech awards, and her mission is truly focused on digital equity. As Executive Director for Distance Learning and Student Services for the Florida Virtual Campus, we are joined by John Opper, who oversees the operation of the distance learning and student support services offered through Florida Virtual Campus. He interacts regularly with state policymakers, education leaders, community agencies, educational entities, and industry regarding issues pertaining to technology and education, and participates in creating statewide distance learning policy and programs affecting Florida's schools, colleges, and universities. And last but not least, we are joined by Rahim Rajan. He leads the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation's team responsible for developing and delivering high-impact, evidence-based solutions that can help transform post-secondary institutions so that many more low-income students of color achieve greater momentum and success in their undergraduate education to help achieve strategy goals to close attainment gaps in order to increase social mobility and prepare the modern workforce. Rajan came to the foundation from roles at Ithaca and JSTOR, where he focused on helping higher ed institutions, learners, and global scholarly community benefit from advances in innovation, research and development, and emerging technologies. Born in Rwanda, he is both a first-generation American and a college graduate. So please join me in welcoming this panel. Who better to talk about where educators can go where they have never gone before? I'm happy to be surrounded by so many futurists and bright thinkers. So thank you to our panel for joining today. I do just want to kick us off and acknowledge kind of what all of us probably know, which is that when COVID happened, it really necessitated that higher ed move online. But we are well aware that there was not a lot of time to create an effective online learning program for those who didn't already have the infrastructure. In fact, we learned that about 49% of faculty reported that they still used the same core instructional materials with no changes. And as a result, we saw a lot of faculty and students unhappy with digital or online learning. 60% of students who learned partially in person before the pandemic had reported a decline in the quality of their education. And 15% of working adult students reported difficulty with the format as their main challenge in persisting. As you think back on the past year, what do you see as the biggest misses of this emergency remote instruction that really differentiate them from the type of digital education that we know is effective? And what did you learn from from that experience that we can all use to help improve digital learning in the future? John, if you don't mind, I will start with you because you are in costume and on theme. So John, go ahead and kick us off.
And occasionally, as you can tell, out there a little bit. Well, in terms of maybe misses, I just don't think as prepared as we all were and as what an amazing job everyone did in 3 or 4 weeks, the huge shift, if you will. I think we learned a lot about how well we really weren't prepared. We learned a lot about providing services to students when we thought we were doing a really great job in online learning, and many of us were, but when the entire campus went online or remote, I don't think we realized that we had all the services in place that we needed. And so that necessitated, unfortunately, throwing money at a lot of things, buying a lot more licenses and adapting very quickly. So I think we weren't as prepared as we thought we were. Many of us thought we had all of our course content in shells, even if we were teaching face-to-face. We found out, nope, we didn't. And we also found that many of our faculty had never logged in to the learning management system. So some of the institutions out there just used their analytics and said, okay, all the faculty who from our data have never logged in, that's where our instructional design and support people are going first. So, there were some great opportunities and great things that happened, but I think we learned that we weren't prepared, even though we did a great job.
That's great. For our other panelists, what lessons learned are there from that shift to emergency remote instruction? Are there any practices that you hope we stop, or anything that you really hope that we continue to do through that time?
All right, I'll jump in, everyone, and life is good. And to my panel members, that's my Star Trek sign. Access, everyone, access. We assume in today's age that everyone had access to the internet. And oh boy, what happened? We left many populations behind. So where we boldly go, where no educators have gone before, we turned around and found many population, underserved students in rural areas, even in cities where we knew, everyone has internet access, we found out not true. So Lisa, as we move forward, we now realize broadband is an international issue as we go forth. And then I'll turn to my colleague, Brian.
I have to agree. Absolutely, that broadband has been one of the great discoveries of this past year, that the digital divide, which some of us have been harping on since the 1990s, is finally on everyone's radar. And that's a good thing, right? That's a sign of progress, although it looks like the biggest step forward, and that was probably being done overhead by Elon Musk. I think there are a few things that we learned. One was we learned a whole series of inequities. We learned about the digital divide, as Robbie brought up. We learned about divides by race, where people of color were disproportionately affected, not by the pandemic directly, but also in their academic engagement. We know that women, in many ways, suffered worse than men, especially in terms of research. And that the inequities applied across higher education. We know that the horrendous job losses, over 550,000 jobs lost in academia this past year, were disproportionately allocated to people of color. And so we're all shocked and energized by that inequity. And hopefully one of the things that we'll be doing going forward is addressing it. Second is that we had all kinds of experiences with online instruction. And all too often it was poor. My colleagues here pointed out that some instructors logged into their LMS for the first time or fired up Zoom for the first experience. There's a lot of learning done in a hurry. One positive thing about this, I find, is that there's a lot of learning, which is great, but also there's a kind of deep commitment now to improve that as much as possible. And within that, one of the things that we learned was one of the great populations that had no media presence and almost no buzz around them, but rapidly advanced into center stage. I'm referring to instructional designers, as well as educational technologists who became heroes last year, and they should be celebrated as such. I think moving forward, we have a big strategic choice to make, which is in response to all of these challenges, do we adjust them? Do we tweak around the edges, or do we actually step forward and come up with visionary, sweeping changes to really reimagine higher education?
Thank you. Rahim, from your perspective and your work, what is it that you feel that schools can do now, or some of the larger changes that we can work toward as we think about this shift from emergency remote instruction to better quality online learning?
I think, I think the past year has taught us a really important lesson, that in post-secondary education, historically, we don't spend a lot of time focusing on pedagogy or andragogy or the quality of the instruction. And I think, when we think about technology is very good at scaling things, and you can scale terrible pedagogy very quickly with good technology. So I think that the notion that we can just not support young faculty or instructors to understanding the opportunity of how to create a more engaging, a more personalized learning experience, how we empower learners to become creators of their knowledge and constructing their knowledge, and really leverage the opportunities of the virtual that are beyond just the synchronous Zoom real-time experience. I think that's the real opportunity of how do you institutionalize that, and how do you make that, in a sense, part of the fabric of the infrastructure of the institution, so that outlasts the crisis. And I think that is the real challenge that we face, that we don't just revert back to the mean and revert back to the situation as it existed before, but we permanently shift the way we teach, the way we design courses, the way we think about student engagement, learner activity, and learner success, in this new world where I think digital is going to continue to grow. It's going to continue to become part of the fabric of the everyday experience.
Agree. And I think as all of you have hit on, we've seen some stark equity gaps really brought to light this year. I think, Brian, you referred to, women and people of color were really leaving school and the workforce at disproportionately higher rates. The digital divide has never been so apparent and determinant of someone's ability to learn and work. And recent census data shows us that 40% of people had to cancel post-secondary plans or take fewer classes due to the pandemic. And unsurprisingly, that fell mostly to those with household incomes of less than 100,000, but it got as high as 52% for those who made under 35,000. And I think, the other piece to keep in mind, we had done some research that two leading reasons for changes to educational plans were caring for others who have coronavirus, or care arrangements like at home with children had been disrupted, or not being able to afford educational expenses because of changes in income. As educators, we all know that we need to do better, or we will continue to see this gap widen. And so what steps can we really take to ensure more equitable access for our learners? And Robbie, I'd love to start with you on this question.
Great, because I'm a component for access. In other words, wherever you are, any place, anytime, anywhere, and any device, you should have that access to education. So with the pandemic, again, everyone, we assumed that we were all able to transition, and that didn't happen. So as you indicated, where are we now and where should we go? I am pleased to share with you there's legislation coming for access for all. So again, in rural areas, we were caught again. That's a whole segment of a population that could not transition very well. So my recommendation in going forward is not only access, but my panel members said it very well. It's teaching online. Again, we didn't have the opportunity to train teachers. So when people did access, they got the talking heads. They entered into an environment that really not ready for digital learning. So everyone out there, when I hear that you cannot learn online, I scream, because you can learn online. In fact, as you all know, and then I'll turn it to my panel, we even had telemedicine. We were able to move in this pandemic with medicine, doctor's appointments, totally online. But why not education? I leave that as an open, pondering question. I'll turn it over to my panel.
Thank you so much, Robbie. And I think those of us attending and on the panel share that collective scream that you mentioned there. But would love to hear, Rahim, I'll turn it over to you. What steps do you see that we can take to ensure more equitable access in the future?
So I think there's, in any kind of crisis, there are opportunities. And I think one of the opportunities right now is to think very deeply about how we build a culture of caring in the online environment. How do we build new ways of supporting students? How do we build new ways of exploration of knowledge? There's so many opportunities that the virtual affords us, unbounding geography from time, and allowing people more flexibility to learn at their pace, on their kind of schedule based on what they're dealing with on a day-to-day basis. And we haven't yet really fully optimized for those opportunities. And I think there's just a lot more we have to do. I think we have to also think about, how do we build inclusive virtual environments? How do we create a space that's virtual, that everybody feels like they can show up as their full self as a learner, and be vulnerable, or ask the questions, or get the support that they need. And I don't think that that's so simple. Like, I don't think it's just like, oh, this worked really well in the lecture hall or in the face-to-face, and we just need to do this in the virtual environment. So I don't think it's just a one-to-one. I think there's real innovation that needs to happen to understand and continuing to explore what can we optimize in that virtual experience to meet learners where they are, so that they can be more successful. And frankly, I think we're going to have to support faculty and instructors to grow and develop new capabilities and new skills. And I think that has to become an institutional priority.
That's right. I really love the idea of the culture of care. I've also heard people talk about what it means to use trauma-informed approaches to teaching and learning. And I think that if there was ever a time, given the climate of social justice that we're in addition to the pandemic, now is that time. But to your point, I think we assume that people either know how to do that virtually or they just don't do it at all. And that's not the case. And so there is certainly a case to be made for how do we grow and develop those kind of skills, beyond providing the instructional design support, there's other supports that are needed as well to really grow and scale. I do want to ask Brian and John to also weigh in from your perspective. What other steps might you have to share around how we can ensure more equitable access and more equitable outcomes?
Well, I would say that higher education was already in trouble before COVID-19. Our finance model was broken, loan debt issues, public confidence. We were dealing with a lot of issues. And in fact, at WCET meetings, I think the phrase we kept hearing is, we're out of runway. We have to deal with these issues. And as horrible as COVID-19 has been, there is opportunity. I mean, we have moved mountains and done things that we would not have done. I served on digital divide councils 10 years ago, and they sort of went away. And the conversation, it's almost like people assume that's been solved. And we discovered through COVID-19, no, it's not. So I think if there's one thing I would say, I'm very concerned that there's this big discussion right now about, we're going back to campus, which I assume means we're just going to drop the ball and retreat. And the thing that I would say is give no ground. I mean, if you think what's happened, we have bought laptops for students, which we would never have done pre-COVID. We bought hundreds of Chromebooks, thousands of them in Florida, and distributed them to students. We have moved school buses all over the counties to provide access where we didn't do that before. And so we're sort of at a point now. It's not perfect. It's ugly. But we've waived policies. We have bought equipment. We have extended broadband. And to think that we might even entertain the concept that students will let us go back to the way it was pre-COVID is unthinkable. And so I think that I just want to harness this creativity. And a lot of my campuses in Florida are really moving forward. They are working on this and continuing to move forward. But my fear is that when the pandemic subsides, as we're starting to get hints of that now, people will just go back to campus and we'll start hardening our arteries again. And that creativity that we have seen faculty use and that willingness to explore and waive policies that are sacred cows, and it's all worked. So I'd like to see us continue on. That would be my wish.
Love that. Love it. Brian?
I second everything that my co-panelists have said. I mean, this is an incredible moment. I worked with a team at Georgetown to produce a document called The Openings, where we look back at the past year and saw that this is a huge door opening wide, as Arundhati Roy calls it, a portal through which we can move and we can create new ways of working. And I think there is a huge and deep desire to do the opposite. I saw this referred to as the snapback that people want to envision. Fall 2019, we want things back the way they used to be. And that's something that we have to honor because after all, academia suffered terribly. I mean, John mentioned that our economics were bad going into COVID. We've been clobbered by it. I mentioned the job loss. Imagine how much worse it would have been without the CARES Act of last year. Think as well about how many people have suffered disease, loss, death in their families. We don't have good data on this. We still don't. We don't know how many people that COVID felled or gave long COVID to in academia. But we have to grapple with that. And then we have to use that as opportunity, I think, to be more humane, to care more. And that's one of the things that's astonished me over the past year. Every campus I've worked with has had a greater attention to student life, a greater wariness about student fragility, more energy spent on how to help students succeed. I think we may have just had a kind of great awakening about the educational purposes of higher education, a recommitment to helping students learn and grow. And I don't want to lose that. I want to keep going with that. I'm sorry, Lisa, that's a very almost metaphysical response to your very detailed question. To your practical side of your question, I'd say one thing that we have to do is keep learning and relearning and iterating and adjusting all of our pedagogy. We have to think, for example, how much asynchronous work should we be doing? Because we know that asynchronous work is better for people with busy lives. It's more accessible often in terms of bandwidth. It has more opportunities for people to engage. So perhaps we should emphasize, shift our balance more towards the asynchronous and save synchronous moments like this that we're enjoying right now and save them for special events. But we have to keep learning and we have to keep improving.
Brian, we appreciate the metaphysical response. And I think that it's spot on, this idea of kind of the hope and the promise of seeing institutions and people at institutions really be focused on that culture of caring, being more human-centered is certainly key. And I think something that has to continue. And I think, John, to your point, I really loved it when you said we cannot retreat, right? Give no ground. We can't get to that snap back. We have to continue to stay focused in that way. And so, as we think about now kind of the future of higher education, and if I could ask each of you to kind of dream big, like what, from your perspective, does the future of higher education look like? And feel free to be metaphysical or idealistic around what these responses is, but would love to hear from this group kind of your thoughts on what the future could look like or should look like from your perspective. And so Raheem asked that you kick us off with this question.
Yeah, I think I hope, and my aspiration at least, is that, to build off of Brian's point, that we don't, we leverage the opportunity of this moment to literally build back better, not to just snap back to the way things were, but to reimagine a new future. And I think, reimagining a new future means that, the institutions that successfully serve a broader, a more diverse set of learners, both from a racial and socioeconomic perspective, that produce really high quality outcomes, produce, real social economic mobility for those students. My hope and my aspiration is that those institutions are the institutions we lift up as the models for emulation, not just, the standard elite institutions that have increasingly become even more prestigious and more elite and kind of, more kind of narrowly focused on educating a very small fragment of our students in the country. So, how do we help more institutions serve a growing number of learners that come with a different set of life experiences, a different set of desires, and frankly, I think so much hinges on that in terms of the fate of our nation. We have a giant task in front of us as the economy shifts, as you see major structural changes take place in the economy, in terms of the kinds of skills that are required, the kinds of knowledge that is required for countries to thrive in this century. It is going to require us rethinking education. And I think that, a very specific thing, for example, in our country, oftentimes the transitions between the various sectors of education, whether it's early learning, whether it's K-12, whether it's post-secondary, as people transition into lifelong learning out into the workforce, those transitions are really painful and they're full of, really bad handoffs. They're not elegant. It's not seamless. Depending on who you are, your social capital, your wealth, your privilege, you're going to navigate those transitions remarkably different than others. And so I think, one of the things I would say is that as a country, we have to think very carefully about those transitions and those junctures. And how do we ensure that there's just less friction for learners so they can accelerate on that trajectory. And it's really less of a either or. Like oftentimes it's like, should students have short-term credentials or should they have, baccalaureate degrees? And, it's like, in a perfect world, we're going to have both. We're going to have students that do attain, they get degrees, they get other kinds of credentials, and they're going to have to keep learning throughout their course of their lifetime. And so we can't just get into these ideological arguments about what's the right kind of design. We have to design, I think, for multiple futures and for a lot of flexibility, and also really think about equity as we design that future, so that we're not creating structures and pathways that are actually inequitable. I think that's the challenge, that we need to really center equity in that redesign, so we are really privileging the futures of students.
That resonates so much, and I think in addition to looking at this world of stackability, I think the other side of that is, what is the future where all learning counts, and where different pathways and different ways of recognizing learning can be valid and still count toward earning that bachelor's, which is still the proxy for economic mobility. And I think that's really the case for the both and. It's not just the either or, just the short skill or just the degree. I think we need pathways where both things can happen, and learning is acknowledged in a wide variety of settings and in different pathways. This idea of designing for multiple futures, that I'll just share with the team here, that there's some early data from research that we had done, and I don't have the exact number, but it was almost I think it was like a 50, it wasn't quite 50-50, a 60-40 split, where when we asked learners what they were, what their end goal was with their education, about half said, I really want a specific career and a specific path. And the other half said, I want to plan for multiple futures. I don't have multiple possibilities. I don't know where that's going to be. And I think that really is a testament really to what you're advocating for, which is a future where higher ed is able to be nimble enough to respond to multiple futures. As we think about this ideal future of higher education, would love, John, to hear your perspective of what that ideal is.
It's hard to think about that a little bit. I think in the shorter term, I'm thinking 18 months or so, it's going to be a struggle. I think we're going to have that desire to go back to 2019. We're going to have a student body that is pushing to continue access issues and all the benefits that they've had, including, policies we've waived on placement testing and things that have actually worked. So I think we're going to really look, if I think about it further out than that, my hope is that we will be very student-centered. My hope is that higher education will probably be looking at much more of a mixed delivery mode, as opposed to just a face-to-face versus online. I think, for a lot of faculty, this remote learning and working from home has been a revelation to them. I can work at home, and it's been one for society. And I think that's going to really change some people's outlooks about what a higher education looks like. I mean, I know students really want to have that social experience of going back to campus, but we had some survey data here in Florida done by my institutions, and students were saying, yeah, we want to go back to campus. So some of our campuses opened up some small face-to-face sections, and nobody enrolled in them. They stayed online, and they stayed in the blended formats. And so I think we're going to see that. I also think with our faculty who have previously taught face-to-face, we've seen from them online learning and instructional design support has been a revelation to them. They are very excited about what they can now do in courses that they have been teaching the same way for 20 years. So I think we're going to see, my hope is that we will see somewhat of a renaissance, that we will see a really change in higher education. And one of the ways that can happen is we're going to have student pressure to do it. We're going to have pressure from workforce industries who are trying to deal with job market changes and all that and need quick, faster training. But I also hope that some of the foundations that have been really a catalyst for change in higher education will continue to put that pressure on and say, let's think differently about this. Let's move forward in some different ways. And at the end of the day, we've had a lot of enrollment challenges, like a lot of institutions across the country have. But some of my Florida institutions have had fantastic experiences calling students on the phone and saying, how can we help you? What are your concerns? And that's resulted in enrollment gains for them. So I think one of the things that we've always known about student engagement and student support is reaching out to students. That one-on-one is really important. And I think in the future, we'll see much more of that from higher education, online or blended. I think that student engagement factor is going to be a real differentiator in the marketplace for higher education institutions.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, John. Robbie, as you think about the future of higher education, tell me your dream. What do you see?
Okay, I want a revolution. I do. I want a revolution in terms of innovation for the greater good. And when I say that, the old sit in the classroom where, yes, many people would like to go back. It's over. We know, and we've been knowing, everyone, that just sitting with the talking head is not going to do it. So there's new theories going on over there, like the high flex, where students select at any time how they want their content, whether it's online, on ground, hybrid, asynchronous, synchronous, in the email, coming to your door, name it. It's a whole new revolution of innovation. And as you know, technology, yes, it's going to be high tech, but it has to be high touch. It's a blend. And as you all know, I'm into innovation all the time. Wearable clothes, wearable jewelry, whether it's telemedicine and I'm blinking my heartbeat or whatever. We are at a point on Earth. We're talking planet Earth now, everyone, where education is everything, everywhere, anytime, as long as you are breathing. We have to take this opportunity in higher ed to understand and build relationships. So when you talk future, if you're majoring in humanities, it stretches across technology and across this world. I will say to everyone, this pandemic helped us to understand we are not alone, and what happens over in X location will impact us here. And we have to stop this, who caused what, when, and why, and learn how to embrace and work as humans. We're all on planet Earth, which means when you ask me that question about the future of higher ed, it's global. It's global. We no longer can sit in the classroom and think what you teach is only what they're going to learn, because now we have the internet that crosses all cultures, all genders, diversity, and we got to learn and we got to be able to apply. For what, everyone? Innovation for the greater good.
Inspiring words, Robbie. And I think when you talk about revolution and revolution for good, I think it probably inspires all of us who are listening in. So thank you for that. And thank you for your response. Brian, would love to hear from you in terms of, as you think about the future of education, and you are a futurist, would love to hear what you dream of when you think about the future for higher education in particular.
Well, it's funny, about 4 years ago, I dreamed that a pandemic might hit the world and how that would impact higher ed. And that appears on page 23 of my most recent book, Academia Next. And nobody noticed that page really until about a year ago. And then everyone's been asking me, what did you do? What did you know? But to add to what my wonderful colleagues have said, one thing is some of these dreams are dark. Our financial pressures are worsening. John mentioned this. We weren't in good shape going into 2020, and we've already seen some other hits. For example, our enrollment declined in 2020 and in 2021. following nearly 9 years of continued total enrollment decline. We know that state governments have been spending less on public universities than ever, and they're not really that inclined to restore public funding. We know that the demographic trend worldwide, once a society goes through modernity, women have fewer children. And we're really seeing that in the US, in the Midwest, and the Northeast in particular. And we're about 3-4 years away from Nathan Graw's famous demographic cliff, as the serious drop in childbirth spurred by the 2008 financial disaster will hit us. And that's really bad news for so many colleges and universities that depend on traditional age undergraduates as enrollees. I would add to this potential geopolitical issues. Robbie eloquently sang the praises of international education and learning, and I second that. But at the same time, we've had pressure from the opposite side, and we've seen this worldwide. We've seen this in Brazil, India, Turkey, Britain, and the United States, the desire that educational institutions should emphasize local resources, local audiences, local knowledge. And we've seen this in Italy. We've seen this in South Africa. It's not an unusual phenomenon. At the same time, the US and China seem to be energetically getting into a new Cold War, which might make the exchange of research, the exchange of students back and forth between these two great countries start to slow down. And it wouldn't just be our two countries. The US has allies in this called the Quad, including India, including Australia and Japan, and China as well has allies through its One Belt, One Road initiative. So we may see that globalization start to harden up. I think in contrast, the potential for technology is so vast right now. I mean, we've known for years that we have the ability to use open education resources and open access and scholarly publication to easily broaden access to scholarly materials. We can just do that, and it's possible that we'll flip to a majority of material being published in those two fashions over the next couple of years. We know that digital tools enable tons of creativity of all kinds, and we can embrace that and do more with that. John mentioned the term Renaissance. That's actually the name of one of my scenarios for how we consider the digital revolution. And we know that spring 2021, this term that's ending right now, we know the only sector of higher education that actually grew students was entirely online institutions. So we have all kinds of pitfalls and dangers, but we have a lot more that we can embrace. As your panel's most notorious futurist, let me step back a little further. Let me just widen our gaze a little further ahead and think that we are just right now starting to get into the first phase of the global climate crisis. And we have to start thinking very, very hard about what that means for colleges and universities worldwide. Everything from how we transform our physical campuses to what happens to our research mission, to what and how we teach, to how we engage with local communities as well as the world. I think COVID has been just kind of a warm-up for that, just a little curtain raiser, just to give us a sense of how we can grapple with the global crisis. And I think that all the suffering we went through in COVID, and I think all the potential, all the goodness, all the realizations and reawakenings that we experienced, I see all those ahead as well as we engage with a much vaster struggle. And I'm just glad that we can do it together with brilliant people like you all.
I could piggyback on that, Brian. There are many questions that I think we have to answer, and we're trying to answer some of them now, but maybe two of the hardest ones for institutions to answer or really tackle that I think are important given what we're looking forward to is, before pre-COVID, there was a lot of concern about our institutions building out these glorious residential experiences for students, residence halls and the physical campus. And while they're beautiful, COVID-19 with all of this, how do you sustain paying for residence halls? That was a big issue during COVID-19, and it's probably going to be an issue as Brian notes and our colleague Phil Hill notes in his recent post. The gains were in primarily online institutions. So really, instead of the physical plant, where we need to be spending money or looking seriously at is in our virtual campus, essentially our AI operations and our ability to do high quality online instruction and all the support services that go around that, and making the hard decisions about diverting funding away from maybe the physical campus to an online campus is going to be a hard conversation to have and a physically daunting one. The second question that's a hard one to have is, are our 4-year degrees and 2-year degrees, as we have always known them, the right product for this marketplace right now? We have competitors in the private sector who are offering educational experiences and credentials that business and industry are snapping up. So there is an arms race in some aspects for that marketplace. And some business and industry are saying, look, I don't have 4 years for somebody to go off and learn this. I need 6 weeks. I need 6 months. I need something faster. I need something targeted. That's not to shortchange the liberal arts. It's just to say that there are a variety of products that our institutions are going to have to offer. And the traditional 4-year and 2-year degree are only one segment of those things. And there's a whole nother range of experiences that the workforce and our citizens are going to need. And they're probably going to need them remotely, or at least in a blended format. And those are big questions for institutions to ask themselves right now.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There is, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I think, John and Brian, you both made an eloquent point. And I think one of the things that this forces is the kind of strategic decision-making at an institution amongst, when you think about governance in higher ed and the decentralization of governance, whether it's through departments, deans, divisions, faculty unions, trustees, local community input, like for institutions to make that strategic pivot to future-proof and to think very long and hard about how do we, strategically leverage fewer resources than we have, say, than 5 years ago from the state coffers. And how do we deploy those resources in strategic ways to make us more relevant and more nimble and more kind of vibrant 10 years out, 20 years out? That kind of leadership that is required to execute that kind of vision. I mean, that's one of the major challenges, I think, is that the leadership, the responsibility of leadership to navigate this crisis, I mean, that's going to be the make or break thing, I think, for the future of many of these institutions, is the quality of the foresight, the quality of the thinking, and the quality of the strategic planning in how they allocate resources to build to that future.
Raheem, I think that, thank you for eloquently kind of summarizing that, but also calling out a key challenge. I mean, we can talk about the changes all day long, but how they're actually institutionalized and operationalized is really one of the great challenges. And before I ask my last question, I do just want to encourage any of our attendees, if you have questions, please, this is your last opportunity to plug those into the chat before I ask kind of my final question for our panelists. We have heard so much about the promise and potential of what lies ahead, but also, Raheem, to your point, some of the work and some of the challenges that lie ahead. And while we've kept the conversation, I think, high level and metaphysical, we've also given very tangible pieces of advice. I do want to ask each of you, as you think about the future and going where no educator has gone before, what is just one tangible step that you hope our institutions or the people on this call, as I scroll through the attendee list, I see instructional designers, ed tech leaders, institutional leaders. What is one tangible step that you hope that the people on this call will take with them when they go back to work after this session, or when they go back to work tomorrow? And so, Robbie, I will start with you.
Okay, I'm going to take you way out in orbit on this one. Okay. Everyone, one thing, content that you can manipulate to address learning styles, culture, anytime, any place. One thing that I didn't share that I have to, so everybody hold on. Remember, in these households, you have basically 1 or 2 computers. But in these households, you have whole family members. Why can't higher ed in the future understand that education starts from birth all the way up and start addressing curriculum, content, whatever. Ladies and gentlemen, right now, you are listening to me probably from your home. And in other rooms, you have other people. Why can't we educate them too? Whether they are preschool all the way up. What happened to holistic education? What about, and I'm going to hurry up, remember in the olden days, old days, where the family sat around a radio and they listened to the Lone Ranger? We can now have families to sit around a computer and learn globally all over the world. So I have to say, we're getting ready to tap into Mars. You know, it landed, you know, they're sending, why aren't we learning globally? So take that away in designing content that can be manipulated, modified, adapted to all. Okay, I'm back on Earth.
Thank you. Thank you, Robbie, for that very tangible, high-level example. And of course, I think most of us on this call really love the focus on that content, the curriculum. How can we educate all? So thank you for that. Brian, I'll go to you next. What is one tangible step that you hope folks can take away?
I was just thinking of the amazing FDR memorial in Washington, D.C., which one part of which is a fireside chat, Robbie, and it has an anonymous person listening to a giant Philco radio. I think one thing that we can do is we can really commit to supporting instructional development. And that means restoring funds that were cut for professional development. It means supporting teaching and learning centers, as well as faculty whose job it is to help other faculty teach better. It may mean as well helping faculty use social media and the digital world productively to help learn. But I think we have to be ready to commit resources specifically to improving the way instructors get to improve their teaching. That's really tangible. Lots of metrics you can put on that, lots of dollar signs. We can do it right now.
Wonderful. Thank you. And John, how about you? What's your one tangible step?
I think when I think about somebody sitting in an office Monday morning and thinking, what can I do? What can we do? Sometimes the bigger questions are hard to think about, but the experience of COVID-19, a lot of us in our course level or campus level or department level, we have streamlined things and waived policy in favor of students. And so what I think people can do, or faculty can do, or administrators can do, is think really hard. Do we really need that? We found other ways around it that were in favor or more student focused. And so let's really try to do that. Yes, we've done that placement test for 20 years, and that's the way we've always done it. But we didn't do it for the last 18 months. And guess what? No significant difference. The students are still progressing. They're easier progressing. So let's make it easier for students to learn. And let's look really hard at those policies we waived and not snap them back immediately. Let's really think about streamlining it. Make it easy.
Love it. Love it. Raheem, how about you?
I think one of the things I would hope more institutions do, and the institutions that have done this continue to do it, is to keep focused on the holistic needs of students. I think for a long time, we were not fully addressing the multiplicity of needs that students had, whether it was around housing insecurity, food insecurity, emergency aid, you name it, mental health support. And I think the pandemic literally forced institutions to reconceptualize and understand what the needs are of their learners. And so I think that, my hope, my aspiration is that a very concrete thing institutional leaders can do, faculty can do, is to really understand what are the needs that their students have and how they can best, to John's point, streamline and make and serve those needs and reduce the barriers, reduce the friction, and really encourage and support their students who are dealing with so many things, but still so motivated and really so inspiring for all of us. And so that's keep focused on the holistic needs that these students have, and let's not lose sight of that.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so to recap kind of the four tangible steps, this focus on how do we take content and look at anytime, anywhere, ways that we can learn across the lifespan, committing to restoring those funds, focusing on the faculty development that needs to happen, streamlining, waiving, questioning policies and practices that ultimately did not serve us and may not be needed and don't serve our learners. And how do we focus on the holistic needs of students? I think those are all very tangible takeaways for our audience. I think the other takeaway that I share as I've listened to each of you share your perspectives and your passion and your views is that we do need to move to a world where it is not an either or, it is a both and that came out when we talked about, is it humanities versus tech? Is it synchronous or asynchronous? Is it local? Is it global? Is it short form or is it the degree? We have to be able to plan for multiple possible futures for education, but more importantly, multiple possible futures for our learners. And so I do want to thank each of you for your time. And I have one more ask before we wrap up. I ask for each of you in under a minute, please, under a minute, tell us, what are you most hopeful about when it comes to the future of education? What brings you the most hope? Brian, I'm going to start with you.
What brings me the most hope are my students of all ages. The traditional age students get dinged for all kinds of things. Millennials and Generation Z are responsible for killing everything from breakfast to houses to marriage. They get all kinds of horrendous stuff dropped on them, especially from baby boomers who don't at all have any consciousness of how goofy it is for them to complain about kids these days. But looking at these guys who came of age after the Cold War, for whom the 2008 financial disaster was part of their lives, for whom the economy hasn't really worked, and now the terrible disasters of the past year are right there as their lives are starting to take off. I look at these students and what they do is they buckle down, they get to work. They're creative, they make stuff. I mean, every day I'm blown away by the persistence, the grit, if you will, these students, their creativity, their ability to work together, and their political vision. I mean, as awkward as it can be and as misfiring as it can be, this is a kind of, a generation that is on fire. And that keeps me going. I hope we have the wisdom to welcome them into our councils as we co-create the new future of higher education.
One of my panelists who wants to follow, tell me, what makes you most hopeful about the future?
Well, I'll try if you like. To me, it's I would agree with Brian, but I want to go and focus on another aspect of this. The incredible creativity that I've seen over this last 2 years, the faculty and their ability to innovate when they're given that ability and said, how can we do this in a classroom? And they've come up with it. I've seen hospitality management programs do menu and recipes by photography, using photography. It's been fascinating to see the ways that they have managed to make it happen. Some of them have been, workarounds. Others of them have been truly innovative ways to work with students. And they've actually listened to their students, taken that feedback, and it's just been amazing. So I think as big as the challenges that we have to face, I think the creativity is there. If we give them the opportunity to really attack it, I'm just amazed at not only students, but the faculty's creativity and the instructional design staff in coming up with ways around our barriers to make it work.
And I'll jump in. How about administrators who are learners? Because if you are willing to learn and listen, then you are able to empower your students and support your faculty member. So I want to say administrators who are learners.
That's great. Raheem, you want to close us out, please?
We've heard students, we've heard the faculty, the instructional designers, we've heard administrators as learners. I think what I'm hopeful for is that full constellation and, early, really thinking about how the social justice crisis that we're also in as a country, how does that help us develop and improve the opportunities in that education affords? And so I talked a little bit about the transitions, but even whether it's access or success, how do we think about who is being successful and who those populations of students are, and how do we, literally raise up the institutions that are punching way above their weight class, who may not have the prestige or the reputation, but they are doing enormous good by educating, millions of students from vulnerable backgrounds. And I think that's the real opportunity. It's the constellation of all those things, but in a sense, like improving the whole sector to think about those equitable outcomes for the future.
Rahim, Robbie, John, Brian, thank you so much. WCET, thank you for bringing together this amazing panel. Appreciate each of you for taking the time to speak to us, and thanks to all of our attendees who made time today. Hope you have a wonderful, wonderful afternoon.
And Lisa, yeah, thank you very much for captaining this through this great session on the future. And if there's a hope that I can throw in there, and it kind of brings us all together, is just I'm just amazed at the amount of work that people have put in this last year and a half, that they've worked hard. We've learned a lot, and we need to apply. We can't lose it. We need to apply that all in the future. So thank you, Robbie, Rahim, Brian, John, for this wonderful session looking at the future. For those of you who are sticking with us, that we'll start in 14 minutes with our breakout session. So look to see where you're going to go and go get something to drink and get prepared for that. Thank you to this wonderful panel, and we're ready for the future now after hearing from them. Thank you all.